On behalf of Albany State University and the Center for Undergraduate Research, I'd like to welcome you to the Spring 2014 Undergraduate Research Symposium. Each semester, aside from the summer, we set aside time to celebrate and honor the students who are doing research and improving our academic capacity here at Albany State University. We recognize that Albany State University can serve as the academic hub for Southwest Georgia. And so in doing that, we invest time in our students to make them better researchers, better academics, and better future scholars. So today, the visitors and the students get a chance to see the work that our students are actually doing so they can see how great our institution really is. I won't prolong the time. First up, we have some introductions and welcomes from ASU administrators. I'd like to bring to the stage Dr. Shanta Hayward, who's the Interim VP for Institutional Advancement, followed by Professor Connie Leggett, who's the Director of Title III.
Thank you, Mr. Rachel Mitchell, for helping me up the steps. It shows that chivalry is not dead. Good morning, everybody. How are you all? How many of you have heard of 409? 409, does that have any significance to anybody? You know the cleaning product? Yeah, I thought I'd give you a hint. The cleaning product, 409, do you know where that came from? That is the number of attempts that the scientists and researchers who were working on that product went through before they perfected it to get it to that point. And so they called it 409. So we're using this household product and cleaning because as a result of the persistence of this particular team to get it right. So what does that have to do, Dr. Hayward, with your welcome and your greetings this morning? I want to welcome you all because 409, the cleaning product, symbolizes what it is that you all do all the time as researchers. It represents persistence, consistency, critical thinking, analytical thinking, and as researchers, that's what you all do. When you have been going through those projects that you're doing, writing those sentences, 409 times, rewriting and redoing it, and if an experiment messes up, you got to start over. Persistence, consistency, analytical thinking, critical thinking, that's what you do. And I want to welcome each one of you here to tell you all how extraordinarily proud that we are at Albany State University to have students here who are going to go out and make a significant impact on the world. Your 409th attempt on the products that you're working on will probably lead you to some places all over the world, and it all started right here. The first attempt at 409 was here with the Undergraduate Research Center at Albany State University. Dr. Dunning is proud of you, Provost Beverly Edmond is proud of you, and we are looking forward to the extraordinarily great things that you all are going to do in the future. So welcome, thank you for all you do, and I am looking so forward to seeing the first attempt of many that's going to make you great. Don't be intimidated by that. That's just the nature of the beast. But be persistent, continue to do well, and we're proud of you. Thank you.
Good morning. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. I spread my wings and fly away. Think about it every night and day. That was a dare. He dared me to do this. But this morning, that's what you can do. You can fly. I'm sure you're wondering why is the director of Title III a part of this program. Let me tell you a little bit about Title III. Title III is an entitlement program from the federal government in which we get federal dollars to strengthen the infrastructure of this HBCU, this Albany State University. And one of the activities that we feel will strengthen the infrastructure of this university that will encompass retention, graduation, and going on to your career is research. So your participation in undergraduate research is really a way of helping this institution. It helps you and it helps us. Our strategic goal, too, says by 2017, Albany State University will be known for excellence in discovery, learning, teaching, and the use of technology. This particular signature involvement in undergraduate research is one that we think will enable you to reach your dreams, to help you to fly. What does research do for you? Well, the data says that research in the undergraduate level gives you a deeper understanding of your everyday courses, and I'm sure you will agree with that. It says that research allows you to build a confidence that you will take with you throughout your matriculation here at the university and on into your particular careers. I hope as soon as you finish your research, you go then and you edit your resume, because any internship and any graduate school wants to know what research have you done as an undergraduate. Research also allows faculty and student engagement. NESE, which is a national survey, has shown that students who have greater interaction with faculty are those students who stay in school. And so, although we are helping you, you're helping us. We want you to succeed. We need you to succeed. The Title III dollars are based upon the number of students who get Pell Grant, the number of students who graduate from the institution, and the number of students who go on to graduate school. That's you. And so we think this activity not only boosts what you're going to do in the future, but it helps this institution to survive. We thank you for participating. And of course, the $1,000 that we give you also helps, right? That helps a little bit as well. Research is a scholarly activity, and you are scholars. Don't ever forget that you are scholars. That's why you're here. You can do all of the other things that are involved in the university experience, but the number one thing is that you're a student and you are a scholar. And we thank you for taking the challenge to do this research and to be a part of this program. I'd also like to congratulate the persons who worked so hard to be a part of this, your faculty mentors, the leader, Ms. McCrae, Dr. Haywood, and the rest of you who have worked entirely behind the scene and with you to make you what you are today. It's not about the competition. It's about you taking on a research project, seeing it to fruition, and then being able to stand very proudly and present it not only on this campus, but all over the world. Congratulations to you, and you're making Title III get more money next year. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming out today. I want to first start off by acknowledging our undergraduate researchers for the wonderful jobs you all are doing as researchers. We are so proud of you. You have just excelled in what you're doing, and what we want to say is to keep it up. Keep up the hard work. It will pay off, and just keep doing what you're doing. And to add on to it, in order for you to do what you're doing, you have to have someone that's there helping you do it. And the people that help you do it are your faculty mentors. So we want to say this morning, thank you to all of the faculty mentors for doing a wonderful job in guiding the students through their research projects. Their research projects, with your guidance, this year has just really excelled. Students have traveled all over the United States presenting their research that they have been conducting here. So again, we're very proud of you. We say keep up the good work. And again, thank you for all the mentors. And for the first time today, we're actually acknowledging 2 of our faculty mentors of the year. One of them is a mentor who actually she's not mentoring this semester, but her student, she mentored last semester, and her student excelled. She came in with this student, she guided him, she was right there with him all through the process. His research was excellent, and she didn't stop when the program finished. She continued to support him, and she's still supporting him in trying to help him get his research published and continue to go to conferences and present. So with that being said, the first faculty of the year for undergraduate research is Ms. Catalina Edward Mons. Dr. Mons, we would like to present this plaque to you in appreciation for your commitment and dedication as a faculty mentor for the Albany State University Undergraduate Research Program. Thank you for the wonderful job. Thank you. Okay, our second faculty mentor of the year is Dr. Hema Mason. Dr. Mason has been just extraordinary. Miss Olivia Lane and Ms. Shakira Burney are her mentees, and these with the guidance of Dr. Mason, the young ladies have just excelled. They presented at Xavier University. They've been selected to present in San Francisco. They have all kind of opportunities coming before them, and again, they could not do it without the guidance of their faculty mentor. These students are in one of our pilot programs, special programs. They're doing community-based, civic engagement and community-based scholarship, where their research is actually reaching out into our local community and looking at issues that's going on here that are also going on nationwide, and they're making a big difference. They're actually change agents because they're making a big difference with their research in the lives of people in our community. So with that being said, we would like to ask Dr. Mason to come up, and I'll ask her. Okay, mentees, would you all like to say something to your mentor?
I just want to thank Dr. Mason for always being available when we need help, because it was really hard, and without her, we probably wouldn't have made it as far as we did.
And she's the best mentor anyone can ever have.
I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Center for Undergraduate Research for your acknowledgement. And students, you are so blessed to be on a campus where mentoring is germane to the mission of the institution. The irony of this award is that just this morning, I received an email of a research study that was conducted by professors from Wharton, Columbia, and NYU that simply addressed the notion of mentoring. And what they did is that they conducted a study where they sent out fictitious email letters to professors requesting their support to mentor students. And the irony of the study is that they chose names that were gender and ethnic specific. And the irony of it is that the names that they chose that were, or the population of students that received the greatest number of hits where professors were optimistic about mentoring them, were not students that look like you. So you are really on a campus where it's important that we continue to uphold mentoring, and I applaud the initiatives of the Vice President, the President, and the Director of the Center for Undergraduate Research. So thanks again for this award, I appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to thank the Center for Undergraduate Research for this great honor. Mentoring is very important to me. When I decided to become a professor, I knew that was one of the goals that I would set for myself, is to become a mentor, to affect change in the lives of my students, and to offer them opportunities to excel in whatever area they wanted to go. So I find it, I consider it an honor to have this award, And I would just like to say that I was in touch with a mentee from last year, actually, who called me yesterday to let me know that they were accepted to 2 universities to go on for graduate studies. So I'm happy to receive this news, especially in my mentoring capacity, because it's saying that there's something that I'm doing that's working. So I'm very appreciative for this, and mentoring these wonderful ladies is easy. It makes my job very easy. I'm so happy to have students like these. I'm sad to see them leave. Wish they will be leaving me soon, but I'm happy to have that door open for the next mentees to come in. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Dr. Christopher Emdin is an associate professor in the Department of Mathematics, Science, and Technology at Teachers College, Columbia University, where he also serves as Director of Science Education at the Center for Health Equity and Urban Science Education. He is currently a Caperton Fellow and a Hip Hop Archives Fellow at the W.E.B. Du Bois Institute at Harvard University. Dr. Emdin is a social critic, public intellectual, and science advocate whose commentary on issues of race, culture, inequality, and education have appeared in dozens of influential periodicals, including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. Dr. Emdin holds a PhD in urban education with a concentration in mathematics, science, and technology, master's degrees in both natural sciences and education administration, and bachelor's degrees in physical anthropology, biology, and chemistry. I don't think you understand how many times I had to go through that to make sure I could say all of that pretty clearly, all right? He is the co-creator of #HipHopEd social media movement and a much sought after public speaker on a number of topics that include hip hop education, STEM education, politics, race, class, diversity, and youth empowerment. He is also an advisor to numerous international organizations, school districts, and schools, where he delivers speeches and holds workshops and professional development sessions for students, teachers, policymakers, and other educational stakeholders within the public and private sector. Dr. Emden writes the provocative Emden 5 series on a number of contemporary social issues for the Huffington Post. He is also the author of an award-winning book, Urban Science Education for the Hip Hop Generation. And one last thing that we want to share is this. Recently, as of February 26, 2014, Dr. Emden was designated a champion of change by the White House. So you can see his influence reaches far beyond the classroom. And we expect that you will definitely get something that will enrich your soul and encourage you to move forward in your academic endeavors as he speaks. So without further ado, I'd like to bring to the stage Dr. Christopher Emdin. Let's give him a hand.
How you guys doing today? Good. I'm actually kind of glad that we have kind of like a nice intimate group. The last time I gave a talk, it was so huge and almost impersonal, so I couldn't look at the faces of the people I was talking to. So I'm glad we got a good core group. So I'm gonna ask, for my sake, not for your sake, if you guys will move and get a little closer together so I can feel like I'm talking to a nice group of people. So you guys who are sitting in the middle, you can sit, you're comfortable. Those of you on the sides over there, I want you to stand up and move over to the center, please, so I can focus on one group of people. And those of you over here also, if you would do me the favor, please, to just move over to that section, I would appreciate it. I know you're like, here he go, coming in here giving instructions. As you're moving around to the center, is there anybody here who's on Twitter? Any tweeters in the building? We got one person, 2, 3. You guys are all, you know you got Twitter accounts, stop fronting. So if you have your Twitter, you have a Twitter account, you have your cell phone, usually when you give speeches, they say put your phones away and turn them off and put them on silent. So I'm gonna do the opposite and say if you're on Twitter, actually whip your phones out right now. And what I've been doing in the last 3 years is this social media movement called Hip Hop Ed. And Hip Hop Ed is like the intersections of hip hop and education. Every Tuesday night at 9 p.m., we have educators from literally around the globe. It started off with 2 people, and now it's thousands of people every Tuesday who have conversations on Twitter about the intersections of hip hop, youth culture, and education. Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. But I want everybody who's on Hip Hop Ed to know that I'm out here in Albany State and we're doing work, you know what I mean? And we're talking about this work and this movement. So you could tweet during the session. You could use hashtag Hip Hop Ed. If you want to send me a message directly or a question as I speak, you can send it to my handle, which is at Chris Emdin. And I'm gonna keep my phone on. So if you have questions that you want to ask as I speak, I will like interject and respond to your tweets as we go along. So now we can get started. Are we ready to get started? So are we ready to get started? Yeah. All right. Now, disclaimer. When I give speeches, two things happen. Either people are like, yo, he was dope, ask him to come back. Or they're like, don't ever bring that guy to your institution ever again. So with that being said, it's a disclaimer. I am a firm believer in truth-telling and honesty. I don't come to any space without telling you what my heart is and where my soul is about this work. I'm glad to speak to a bunch of people who are conducting research, especially interdisciplinary research, because I think that is at the core of moving the agenda forward in this nation, particularly for people of color. So that's why I was like, when my business manager were like, well, they're doing about I was like, I'm there, make that happen. And so that leads to my notion of research and my notion of what it means to be an academic and an intellectual. A couple of weeks ago, a song was released by this rapper named Jay Electronica. Does anybody know who Jay Electronica is? And Jay Electronica, not everybody, you guys gotta go listen to his music. He's brilliant. But Jay Electronica released this song, and the song was entitled Better in Tune with the Infinite. And to me, that is at the core of what it means to be an academic, to be a scholar, and to be a researcher, is to be better in tune with the infinite. And so the question always is then, what exactly is the infinite? What does that mean? And the infinite is like this concept that all human beings in this world are interconnected to histories beyond us, but histories in the past of us. That when you stand in any space as a scholar, as an intellectual, as academic, as a researcher, you're not just standing representing yourself, you're representing a long storied history and tradition that is infinite. Mathematically, the infinite lasts and goes on forever. The symbol for the infinite in mathematics is this 8 that's on its side. And that 8, it doesn't stop or end, because if you keep following and tracing that pattern, it'll go on forever. So our work is to be better in tune with the infinite. And if you're gonna be better in tune with the infinite, I'm gonna use some lines from Jay Electronica to sort of nest this. And usually when an academic gives a talk, the Ivy League professor gives a talk, they're expecting you to start quoting, Shakespeare or quoting Du Bois or Frantz Fanon or whoever the academic is. And so I start off by quoting Jay Electronica. And if you'd pardon me really quickly, there's a little bit of vulgarity in here, but I'm gonna skip over the vulgarity. I want you to see past the vulgarity and see into the message and what he's describing for who we are as academics and researchers. He says, it's frustrating when you just can't express yourself, and it's hard to trust enough to undress yourself, to stand exposed and naked in a world full of hatred, where the sick thoughts of mankind control all that's sacred. I pause, take a step back, record all the setbacks, fast forward towards the stars in a jetpack. My feet might fail me, my heart might ail me, the synagogues of Satan might accuse or jail me, strip crown, nail me, brimstone hail me. They might defeat the flesh, but they could never ever kill me. They can feel the music, but they could never ever feel me. To the lawyers, to the sheriffs, to the judges, to the debt holders and the lawmakers, F you, sue me, bill me. The name on that birth certificate, that ain't the real me. The lies can't conceal me. The sunrise and moon size and sky's gonna reveal me. My brain pours water out the tear ducts to heal me. My Lord's too beneficent. The message grab a hold to every year it gets whispered in. The waters in the bayous of New Orleans still glistening. The universe is listening. Be careful what you say in it. My grandma told me every bed you make, you lay in it. The church, you're gonna pray in it. The workers on the outside, staring out the windows for love songs and houseflies. And that, to me, is the work of an academic and is the work of a researcher. So I'm gonna break down a few of the lyrics real quick. I'm gonna annotate. To be an academic, to be a researcher, do the work that you guys did, whether you're talking about the effects of marijuana or you're affecting the effects of Geico as they target specific communities, because yes, I did go check out your research. Any of those things that you're doing requires that you are enveloping the work in a larger context. And also requires that you have to be really honest about what it is that you're doing. And Jay Electronica's first line, it says that it's frustrating when you can't express yourself and it's hard to trust enough to undress yourself, to stand exposed and naked in a world full of hatred. Now, I'm not expecting you as researchers to now get butt naked as you describe your work. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that in order to be an academic and a researcher, your task and responsibility is to unveil every single piece of who you are into that project. That when you're researching Geico and how they target towards communities in Albany, Georgia, it's not about Geico, it's about the communities that you're working in. And you have to stand exposed and naked and unveiling all the nuances of what it means to be part of that community. To be a researcher means to be able to know yourself and to bring yourself to that work. When you're doing research today that you've done for this one small project, that's something that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your life, hopefully. In fact, if you start following the research that you're conducting today to grad school and to your PhD program, you become so deeply versed in that work that you know more about that thing than anybody else would. That, to me, is your version of standing exposed and naked, knowing every single piece of that work. Are y'all with me? The second thing he said was, they could defeat the flesh, but they could never, ever kill me. And he talks about this idea that lies can't conceal me, the moon sides and the skies will reveal me, which means essentially that you're doing the work today, but the true self that's enveloped in that work will reveal itself later, but only if you do good work. Y'all understand what I'm saying? If the work that you're doing is not really deep, if it's not really committed, if you're not standing exposed and naked and doing that work, guess what'll happen inevitably? That will get revealed. If you put your passion and your love and your desire and you up all night, you trying 409 times, people will look at that research and actually see the effort that you put into that research. Inevitably, what you put in will get revealed. On the way over here, when I was driving in, I was saying, I was talking to the young lady who drove me in, and I was like, you know what, Vanessa, you can't ever cheat the grind. What I mean by that is, like, if you put work in, it'll get revealed and people will realize it. And if you don't grind, it might look polished today, but inevitably people will realize it. If you stand exposed and naked in the work, the truth gets revealed. That's one message. The second message is this, and this is the part where, it gets heavy for me. This right here I'm going to read to you is an obituary. It's an obituary of a man named Thomas Fuller. Who's ever heard of Thomas Fuller? Everywhere I go, no one knows about this dude, right? But Thomas Fuller was a slave, and Thomas Fuller was a mathematician. And he speaks to my soul because I'm a scientist and mathematician. He lived from 1710 to 1790. He died at 80 years old. And when he died, no one knew who he was, but somebody wrote an obituary about his life. And the obituary reads, died, Negro Tom, the famous African calculator, aged 80 years. He was the property of Mrs. Elizabeth Cox of Alexandria. Tom was a very black man. Like, they couldn't even say he was just a black man. He was a very black man. All right? He was brought to this country at the age of 14 and was sold as a slave. The man was a prodigy. Though he could never read or write, he had perfectly acquired the art of enumeration. He could multiply 7 into itself, then that product by 7, and the product so produced by 7 for 7 times. He could give the number of months, days, weeks, hours, minutes, and seconds in any period of time that any person chose to mention. He would give the number of poles, yards, feet, inches, and of barley corns in any distance. And he talked some more about what he did related to science, calculating the Earth's orbit, etc. But what's most powerful is this last line. He drew just conclusions from facts, surprisingly so, for his opportunities. Had his, Thomas Fuller's opportunity, been equal to those of thousands of fellow men, even a Newton himself, that's Isaac Newton, would have been ashamed to acknowledge him a brother in science. Say that again. Even a Newton himself would have been ashamed to acknowledge him a brother in science. So what was this thing about? I'm going to weave this thread. I feel like I'm preaching, but it is what it is. I'm going to weave this thread between standing exposed and naked in your work and the life story of Thomas Fuller. So Thomas Fuller was a slave. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, but he was this mathematical genius. And there was a point here where he described the fact that they would bring him out because he was a slave up onto the stage to parade him. And they'll have all these scientists and mathematicians around him. And then they will have pens and paper so they could calculate. And Tom had none of that. And they would give all these mathematical computations, and Tom would sit there and he would start calculating in his head. And they were writing all these things down, and then Tom would come up with the answer before they even could come up with the answer. And at the end, they'd be like, okay, so what's the answer? And then remember, there was one story that said once he calculated the amount of days and years and times and something, and it was like, Tom, what's the answer? And he gave the answer. And then one of the guys who was calculating said, nope, that's wrong. I get this calculations, that's wrong. And then Thomas just calmly said, well, you forgot to account for the leap years. You know what I mean? Because his mind was operating on such a level that they couldn't understand it. And he died in relative unknownness until his passing. Why? Because he couldn't read or write. Now, to be heavily in tune with the infinite means that somehow, as scientists and mathematicians and researchers, You are connected to Thomas Fuller. His opportunities were removed from him because he didn't have the ability to read or write. So we hear about his greatness in his obituary. But you right now, to be heavily in tune with your infinite, knowing that you can read and write and conduct research and do practice, means that you are the evolution of Thomas Fuller. The Thomas Fuller who not only has the intelligence, but also has the ability to read or write. However, if you don't stand in tune to the infinite, and you don't really stand naked in your work and own it, you are betraying the legacy of a Thomas Fuller. To be heavily in tune with the infinite means that you're speaking for ancestors before you who are not blessed with the opportunity to have the skills that you have. That you are actually an evolution of their intelligence, now with more skills. Y'all with me? So now I'm going to talk about my research, because we can't talk about interdisciplinary research without me giving you an example of what it means. Matter of fact, let me go back real quick, because I want to just say this real quick too, because this is important about Thomas Fuller. You see, Thomas Fuller in 2014 would not have been glorified as a brilliant man. Why? Because Thomas Fuller did not have the credentials to be able to be perceived as a mathematics genius or a science genius, because he couldn't read or write. And if that's the case, and he couldn't be perceived as such, we have to realize that who would have not perceived him as such is important to know. And the people who would not have perceived him as such are people who oftentimes are just like us. See, by virtue of being in a university campus and conducting research and getting accolades and traveling around the country, like that's gangster, that's dope. Like I love that. That's what I speak to. I mean, that's what I live for. But at the same time, what happens when we become these intellectuals and these academics is we end up being the people who start looking down upon those who don't have the same skills and dispositions and traits and attributes that we think that we have as researchers and academics. Like we would be the folks who are on the university campus talk about, well, Negro Tom can't read or write, so he's not really a mathematician. And so part of our responsibility, your responsibility as undergrads who are conducting this research is also to remember that you cannot be part of a machine that also looks at those who are not in this room with you today as less intellectual than who you are. That they are Thomas Fullers who may not read or write, and you're Thomas Fullers with the ability, and your responsibility to ensure that you stand for them. See, the nature of being an academic and an intellectual and a researcher, and I've been in this myself, is that you're being taught that the further along you go on in this journey to be a researcher and academic, the less the more you have to divorce yourself from your hood and academic and hip hop self. Y'all don't even feel me, son. So I'm saying that when you go on to 9th grade and 10th grade, you're like, well, now you're smart, you're getting better, you're 12th grade, now you're going to college. Now you're going to college, and you have to learn how to talk different, act different, interact different, write your papers different, enunciate, use the N's and G's in the back of your words, cross your T's and dot your I's. And what you're actually learning in that process oftentimes is to divorce yourself from the communities that you come from in pursuit of being a researcher and academic. So you keep on going further and further and further. You graduate undergrad, you go to grad school, you're really feeling yourself, you're making it up. And sometimes what happens to a lot of us is that we go up to this point where we start forgetting where it is we came from. We start forgetting our traditions, our words, our expressions. And let me tell you something. You go on for a very long time and you keep stripping away who you are, you get to a point where you can't go back to where you come from. Because you forget how to speak that way, interact that way. You forget how to communicate with communities that way. As a matter of fact, when you front for so long, they don't even want you back. Right. And you think, well, it's okay because I'm pursuing something higher. But guess what happens oftentimes when you pursue something higher? Is that you can't erase this black skin. And oftentimes we're in pursuit of an alternate reality that doesn't ever exist because we're never fully accepted. So you go and you can't go back to the hood, and then you're going up front to the next level and they're looking at you like we're not letting you in. And that becomes the paradox of the black intellectual. The paradox of the black intellectual, the paradox of the black researcher is that they've learned for so long to divorce themselves from the communities that they come from, and they get to a certain juncture where they can't fit into the communities that they were chasing for a very long time because that system was not designed to ever fully let them in. Then you end up in this space where you can't go forward and you can't go back, and then you end up just serving your own self-interest in that one space. And that is one thing that I have to share with you, because as a researcher, our work is to be in tune with the infinite. To be in tune with the infinite is to be deeply connected to not only the Thomas Fullers, but that dude in the hood that's right next to you. That you have to learn how to have a hybridized identity. That you could be ratchet and active. You could be a ratchetdemic. Why not? You could be a hip-hop intellectual. That the only way for us to be able to transform the game of research for you guys to be true researchers is to always remember where it is that you came from and make sure that you put the extra effort to use where you came from and put that into your academic self and your research. The purpose of research is not just to chase some dream, to describe some concept. The purpose of the research is to present to the world that there are pieces of who we are that they have no idea how to fathom yet. And by you being the intellectual who can travail both words, who can code switch, who can navigate those things, who embraces all of it at the same time, that actually makes you the better researcher. When you go to an academic space and you describe your work and research, and then all of a sudden, just to mess their head up, they didn't even know it, you just introduce a word and term and expression that speaks to your colloquial communities. They can't handle that. And that, when you express your brilliance and introduce that, you're opening up a door for those who are in those communities to have a way in. Y'all understand what I'm saying? I love to do this when I have a dissertation. This happened to me last week. I'm now forgetting my slides. I'm just talking to y'all, right? I was sitting there and we had a dissertation that I was on a committee for. And there was a black young lady who was in there conducting her research, kind of like what you're going to be doing. And she started her research as an undergraduate student too. And she made it all the way to get her PhD. And she's getting out there and she's describing her research, and then she describes her theoretical framework. And her theoretical framework was so rich. It was so complex. It was such a bricolage of things where she was drawing from Du Bois, but she was also drawing from Kanye West, and she was wrapping it up so pretty and nice. And she did this, and the other members of the committee who happened to be white were looking around like, what is she saying, right? And then I looked at her, I was like, yo, that theoretical framework is so dope, son, like, because I'm a New Yorker, so that's how we talk. I'm like, yo, that theoretical framework is so dope, son, like, the way that you flip that Kanye joint to talk about Du Bois' double consciousness was crazy. And she and I just started connecting. And they were looking around like, what did you just say? Did you see her? Did you say her theoretical framework was dope? And I was like, yeah. And she was, what do you mean by it's dope? And the reason why I did that, and the reason why we did that, and the reason why I encouraged her to engage in that type of research is for that moment, those white PhDs in that room got a chance to understand what it feels like to not understand the complexities of the brilliance of a different population, right? But in that moment, they know what it feels like not to be welcome, but know that it's dope, but they just don't have a way in. And that's the kind of experiences that a lot of black and brown people of color have in schools today, where the structure of the institution doesn't welcome them, so they're alienated from it, but they're viewed as less than intelligent. And so you guys are the next generation of intellectuals to be able to pull forth your hip-hopness and your intelligence all at the same time and wear it. Like, 2 Chainz said at the same damn time, like academic and intellectual and hip-hop and hood at the same damn time. When you present that self, they can't handle it. And that's what we need. We don't need any more intellectuals and researchers who are chasing what them folks are doing. We need a new generation of people who can articulate their work brilliantly, but still be authentically who they are. And what that requires is that you become a scientist. Now, when I ask young people, who here is a scientist, most people just start burying their heads in the sand. They don't want to have a conversation about it. And I'm telling you this, that, you see, in order to be heavily in tune with the infinite, to be better in tune with the infinite, you have to be able to embrace the traditions of the infinite. As people of color, we are deeply entrenched and married to scientific and mathematical ways of knowing and being. Institutions of higher education, schools, etc., have taught us for a very long time that that's not who we are. But it's a falsehood. Like, we are deeply mathematical and scientific by nature. When I talk to a young person of color and they tell me I don't do good in math or I don't know science, it scares me. Because what it means is that you don't even know where you came from. So my whole thing is I never want to hear anybody ever again say I'm not a scientist or a mathematician. I am a scientist, I am a mathematician, and I'll tell you why. By virtue of being a person of color, you have an inherent, natural, built-in science-mindedness. A science-mindedness is all the skills, traits, dispositions, and attributes that are found in the most brilliant scientists of our time. Think about Albert Einstein, for example. Einstein developed the theory of relativity, yes. He developed that E equals mc squared, yes. But Einstein could not develop that theory of relativity without going through this process where he actually imagined himself sitting on top of a light beam, riding through that light beam in outer space. Crazy. That's seemingly anti-mathematical and anti-scientific. That's all imagination and creativity. When you listen to any MC today, you have a dude who lives in his mom's basement, but imagine himself with 20 Bentleys. That is an active imagination at work, and he can convey that reality so brilliantly through that track that you believe he actually does have 20 Bentleys. That is analogous to me to actually thinking that you can imagine yourself riding a light beam in outer space. That creativity that builds science genius is inherent in those populations amongst us that we view as anti-intellectual. So observation skills, Skepticism, like we don't believe you, you need more people, right? Evidence-based thinking, open-mindedness, creativity, being analytical, being reasoning. Every young person who comes from urban communities, every young person who comes from rural communities who are African-American and has to understand the context where they come from to be able to make sense of their realities every day, has the deep skills and traits and dispositions to be successful as a scientist. They just have never entered into a space where somebody tells them how to apply those skills into a scientific space. And so my message to you today is always call yourself a scientist and mathematics brilliant person first. Does it matter if you don't know the formula? Nope. But my mindedness, my presence, my being is inherently scientific and mathematical because I'm heavily in tune with the infinite. So now I'm going to break down the framework because I can't help but teach. It's just to help y'all understand this real quick. How this makes sense, not just in me saying words to you, but theoretically. See, every human being goes into a space with what we call, as sociologists, social capital. By the way, I say as what we call as sociologists. I don't got a degree in sociology. My degrees are in the sciences, right? But as an African-centered man who comes from traditions beyond me and knows about storytelling, my culture is sociology. So I claim disciplines I've never heard of. That's what, let me break this down real quick. That's what being interdisciplinary means. Do you guys realize that, right? We oftentimes perceive this notion of being interdisciplinary as that we all cross worlds in science and math and social studies and English as these separate worlds. And if you get an English person to talk to a math person about how English and math may be connected, that's deeply interdisciplinary. I make the argument that that's a superficial rendering of the complexities of being interdisciplinary. Being interdisciplinary just means that you engage in the world so in tune to your histories and traditions that you can grab onto any academic discipline that you want at any single moment and own that. Especially in the age of Google, how folks don't tell me they're not scientists when you can just Google some science information, know it, and just move, right? We exist in these silos, like, oh, I'm not good at math, so I won't do math. I'm not good at English, You can be whoever and whatever it is that you want to be, not in a corny, like, yes, you can, but you can be and do anything you want to be because you're so in tune to a tradition that allows you to study anything and incorporate it into what you know that you're better off. In fact, talk about hip-hop. And this is why I embrace my hip-hopness. Do you know that hip-hopness is the chief cultural artifact of today's time? Do you know that I just got a call from the State Department that asked me to be a speaker on hip-hop and education, and they're sending me to Lebanon to have a conversation about hip-hop and education. Meaning that the State Department understands the power and the potential of hip-hop and hip-hop culture. They use that for us to go overseas and have countries in other spaces respect and admire the United States. But we might hate the United States, but they came up with hip-hop, and we love hip-hop, so we love the U.S. That's that. If the country, those who are at the helm of making the decisions about the nation, understands the power and potential of the hip-hop sensibility to be able to go across the globe, then why are we as academics divorcing that from who we are? It's oxymoronic. It doesn't make sense. So we have our own forms of social capital. And folks who are not from our communities also have their own forms of social capital. White folks who are affluent have their own ways of knowing and being, and people who have shared social capital have a tendency to gravitate towards each other. So if I'm rich, and we have the same opportunities, and we have Benzes, then if I meet you and I see you, I'm gonna have a conversation with the person who's also rich and have Benzes. We could talk about how fly our Benzes are. And so we have communication with each other, we share social capital. And if we walk into a room with somebody who did not drive a Benz and wasn't rich, we wouldn't even bother to have a conversation with them because they don't understand our life, like this fly lifestyle of fly whips that we drive, they couldn't get it. So we don't engage with them. At the same time, people who are urban from certain communities have their own ways of knowing and being. The way we walk, the way we talk, the way we dress, the way we interact. And because of that, we interact with folks who are just like us, and we have our own forms of social capital. The difference is this: when forms of social capital that are beyond us exist, and people are communicating and having decisions and making conversations about us, and then we're saying here operating in this way, we don't ever connect, correct? So you have people who have a lot of affluence making decisions about the rest of the world because they have shared forms of social capital. The only way that we could break that is to have what we call structural holes. Structural holes are things that you go into to penetrate existing dense networks and create weak ties. And once you create those weak ties, you can build them to be strong ties. What are the structural holes? The structural holes are you guys here. The folks who are able to travail both words at the same time, you could go into those academic spaces and spit your research paper the way they want you to get you in the door. And then once you get into the door, you created a weak ties and open up the world for the rest of us to be able to come in and bum rush the stage as well. Do you understand my concept here? The work for you is to have these weak ties to open up the space for more stronger ties for new communities to be able to get in. Just have to break it down socioculturally, you know what I mean? Because folks be acting like, well, he's talking about this culture stuff. You can't bring it to the academic level. So now my example, because you always got to bring an example. We always teach by example. You guys see that image on that screen? That's a rapper. There's a colleague I partner with. His name is Jizza. And GZA is one of the founding members of the group, the Wu-Tang Clan. Anybody ever heard of the Wu-Tang Clan?
Yeah, dude.
Kinda, sorta, maybe not. We got some young folks in here, so Wu's old to them. Makes me feel old. But this is GZA. And GZA shot this image for one of his albums were coming out. He got up there and they were like, well, you know, what do you want us to shoot? They were like, well, what you need to do, GZA? By the way, the people who are telling him to do this don't look at all like him. Well, you want to be menacing, intimidating, and carry an image that'll really capture the minds, you know, of the people, right? So you need to stand behind a brick wall, put two guns out there, put a menacing look on your face, and that is what the people want, right? So GZA is presenting an image of what the people want by people telling him what he should be portraying. But this man is actually this man. GZA from the Wu-Tang Clan is actually the biggest science nerd and geek I've ever met in my entire life. This is GZA in a science laboratory, going in there, literally learning science with other scientists. He could remember the time in the school as a 10th grader where he was in science trying to interact and the teachers wouldn't let him, and he dropped out of school. He dropped out of school and formed this rap group that went platinum, right? And then he became rich and they toured the globe. And then 20 years later, he's looking at himself in the mirror and saying, you know what I really wanted to do with my life? Is I wanted to be a scientist. They're designed for me that the only thing I could do is be an MC. But being better in tune with the infinite meant that I wanted to be a scientist. So he used, and he was calling labs, like, hey, this is Gary Grice, aka GZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. I'd like to come to your lab and just learn some science. They were hanging up on him like, please, this is a prank call. Y'all, you know, he's bugging. In reality, that's who he wanted to be. His next album, finally getting to the point over the course of his career and all these albums, all the Wu-Tang albums, Wu-Tang Forever, his next album is called Dark Matter, and he's rapping about the complexities of science in the universe. Taking himself 20 years to get to the point where he could be better in tune with the infinite. And that's something that you, as undergrads doing this research today, can start off early. You don't have to go 30 years chasing a dream and then remember back your communities. Right now, you can hold that now and be better in tune from now on for the rest of your life. It's beautiful. I wish I could go back to when I was your age, like 19, 20, 21, you know what I mean? Heavily swagged up and still doing my science stuff. Because it'll open up so much more of a world that I have to go back and fight to get back into. But you can do that now, being better in tune with the infinite. And this goes even deeper. Now you're gonna have to hear me out for real, right? We're not just talking about culture, we're not talking about art, we're talking about the neuroscience of this process. That we are different as folks of color. And that scares people. So a couple days ago, not days ago, actually about a year and a half ago, a bunch of researchers at the NIH got a bunch of rappers. And they said, you know, let's research what these rappers do. And they brought them to a laboratory. And they were gonna conduct research on what made these rappers what they are. Right? By the way, there are researchers right now conducting research on rap, what rappers do, how hip hop affects communities, urbanness, and they've never been to the hood and probably never listened to a rap track. What does that mean? It means that by virtue of you being able to have done that, because that's what you do every day of your life, you're a better expert in that domain than they ever will be. But it requires you having the academic credentials with that to be able to do it. I'm trying to hit my point from multiple angles. I hope y'all feel me, right? So these guys, they took these rappers, and the first discovery they made was, wow, these rappers have a really extensive vocabulary. They know a lot of words. Duh. We all knew that already, but that was a scientific discovery. Then they attached fMRIs to these rappers as they were freestyling. And as these rappers were freestyling, they started noticing something really interesting. The medial prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is highlighted in blue on what you see on that screen, was firing in very interesting ways as they were freestyle rapping. That's the part of the brain that controls learning, active thinking, motivation, etc. And all this is firing while they are rapping. As this was going on, there was a concurrent research study that was being done where folks were attaching fMRIs to kids in science classes as they were learning in a traditional way that they've been learning to teach in science classes. Guess what happens? The dorsolateral region of their brain was acting really funky. The dorsolateral region of the brain is the part of the brain that controls appropriateness, behavior, decorum, knowing that you don't start wilding out when somebody starts speaking to you, right? So now let's take this a little step further. This means that in a traditional classroom, by the way, the people who were, the dorsolateral region were acting up were those who were more tendency to be rappers, young men of color. Which means that in a traditional classroom, the nature of the instruction in that space is not conducive to the learning styles of that population. I don't think y'all feel me. Let me take a step further. Let's go this way. So just so y'all feel me. So they're saying that when the rappers are in that space, when they're learning with their full authentic hip hop selves, the part of the brain that controls learning is activated. When they go into the classroom, the part of learning that controls learning is deactivated, and the part of their brain that doesn't allow them to be able to control themselves is activated. If you look at young men of color in schools, they are most likely to be suspended, most likely to be given ADD, ADHD medicine, most likely to be perceived as not having the intellectual capability to be successful in those spaces. But is it a function of their intelligence or a function of the inability of the structure of the school to approach a learning style that will allow the parts of their brain to be activated like it does in hip hop to not be present in the classroom? That if the dorsolateral region of the brain is activated with your approach to teaching and learning, maybe your approach to teaching and learning is flawed. And if your approach to teaching and learning actually conveyed the complexities of what they were doing when they're engaged in that hip hop process, they would actually be learning in the classroom. That they're different, but they're not deficient. Which then means that we need a new generation of scholars and intellectuals to be able to advocate for the complexities and the nuances, the brilliance of hip-hopness and urbanness and blackness. Because that's what it means to be better in tune with the infinite when this is going on. Oh man, I lost my video, man. I was in my zone too. This video was actually a video of young people in a church when they caught the Holy Spirit, when they caught the ghost. So they were shouting, and they were in their zone, just turning up. Although I shouldn't be comparing turning up to what happens in church, but they do be turning up. I'm saying they do, right? And this second clip was actually of a rapper freestyling. And as the rapper was freestyling and everybody was getting hyped, they ended up turning up as well. And I was trying to make the connections between the sort of the metaphysical, the space that happens in that black church as it is connected to what happens in the midst of rap ciphers. As it's connected to what happens when West African talking drums are orchestrating in ciphers. As it's connected to what happens when you had slaves singing slave narratives against their masters in the back room. The reality is that what happened in West Africa and what happened with the slave narratives and what happens in the black church and what happened in the hip-hop cipher are all deeply connected. We see the same attributes. That is the infinite connectedness. And so us as scholars and academics have to be better in tune to the infinite. And to be better in tune to the infinite means to be able to understand how all these things are deeply connected. And how when we go into academic spaces conducting research, we actually have to bring in the traditions of the Pentecostal pedagogy, the traditions of the black church, the traditions of the slave narrative, because that's the next level and next phase of research. And the beautiful thing about that is everybody wants to do research about it who's not from it, but when you're from it and you embrace it and attach that to your research, you're so much more of an expert than them, they don't even know what to do with you. That's the brilliance you have. And I'm gonna close out just talking about some history of this notion of comedic pedagogy. Comedic pedagogy is rooted in African understandings and African ways of knowing and being, African ways of communication. Heavy use was made of proverbs, songs, and stories in teaching in the African tradition. Direct and symbolic lessons were taught through those stories. We use analogies. We use this idea of the above is exalted by below, and these things should be present in African diasporic culture today. And so I'm making the argument that when you're conducting your research, not only do you want to conduct that research in a way that's acceptable by a white supremacist standard ideology, which is what we oftentimes ascribe to. When we tell everybody, you have to be appropriate, you have to have decorum. I'm not saying don't do that. You know what I mean? I like to get fresh too. You know what I mean? I got the sales cycle and all that. Like, I understand the notion of ascribing to a certain disposition that's seen as the norm. But knowing that our ways of knowing and being a part of songs and stories, your research is not your research until you can describe it in the way that those folks need to hear it, and then you can describe it in a way that the kid on the corner in the hood could hear it as well. That you have to be able to describe it academically, but you also have to be able to tell it in a proverb, song, and stories, because that's when you fully know that you're heavily in tune with the infinite. That's when you actually know your work. If you only describe the work so other folks can know it, but the folks in your hood can't get it, then you ain't doing good work. Then what's the purpose? African-centered pedagogy, comedic pedagogy also talks about this idea of personal transformation, grammar, rhetoric, arithmetic, astronomy. I've been actually doing research now. I just did a TED Talk called Teach Teachers to Create Magic, where we literally have been going into black churches and just watch how them pastors have a deep command over that audience. When a pastor goes up there and says, and the church says amen, and everybody's like amen. And then when the pastor's looking at the crowd and everybody like they're going to sleep, and he's like, you know what, brothers and sisters, why don't you just get up and go hug somebody? You think he's doing that by accident? No, that is a pedagogical approach. That's somebody who's deeply connected to the audience and knows when and where to incorporate different things to get the right response out of that audience. That is actually a pedagogical practice. That is something that you need to bring to your work and your research as you describe it. That's what makes you special and different. Look, anybody can go out there and conduct research on whatever topic you want to conduct. And if you put enough time and effort and work into it, they could do it and sound good. I want y'all to know that, like when I say you can't cheat the grind, if you put enough work into something, You could describe it and sound like you know exactly what the heck you're talking about. But to own it is different. To own it, like that's my stuff. To stand naked in that work and say this is all me, as Drake would say, that's different. All right? I'm gonna close out just to connect back the sciences of math, that hip hop has always embraced the scientific, from the Bismarckies to the Marley Marls to the formulas. You think that these symbols are accidental? It's a cry within those communities who've been told that they're not intellectual to want to be represented in those ways, to look at the idea of the sciences and mathematicians. Everybody sees a scientist and mathematician as a person who's dope and smart in those communities. That's a piece of who we are, even in hip hop. And even in this.
Brown skin, I be standing 5'10", I be rocking it when I be in your vicinity. Raw style synergy, recognize symmetry. Come try to injure me, broke them down chemically. Ain't the number 10 MC, talking about how when I be styled it like Kennedy, late like a 10 to 3. When I say when I be, girls say when I key, cause this lieutenant be working way out like Tennessee. Take me to a place called the BK without pause or delay. Get run like pen relay. Don't deal with he say, she say. Ain't working for no cheap pay. The most deaf beat play. This what the streets say. Hey, Mr. DJ, play that devil Mogan. See,
I get excited about this. You can keep the lights dim because I like to move with the moment. Like, so as he's rhyming, what do y'all notice? Do you see that everybody's heads are like almost nodding in unison? Not only that, when he says a fly line, everybody gets hyped and go woo and get hyped, right? Do you notice that at some point, dude behind him with the glasses, he's feeling the lyrics so much, he's like here like, you see that face? Like, woo, right? He's so hyped, he got to show the brother that he loves what he's doing. So he reaches his hand out like, damn, let me just get some of that energy from what it is that you're presenting. See, that is a deeply African-centered approach to pedagogy and description of research that traditional approaches cannot even come close to capturing. Let me tell you a story. There were some researchers the other day who they were studying these birds. The birds are called the white zebrafinch. I think this is flies in science, so I love science stories. They were studying the zebrafinch. The zebrafinch is a bird that always sang this beautiful song. And the song was so amazing that the researchers were like, well, how are they, from generation to generation, keep passing this song along? So they mated the birds with another bird, and then they started realizing that the old bird would actually, a male bird, will teach the next generation of male birds the song. And that's how the song started getting passed down from generation to generation. So they mate, then they learn the song. So scientists, that's what we do. We're like, well, what happens if you take that bird away from its lineage and then put it somewhere else without learning the song? So they did that. They took the bird that was learning the song away, then they mated it with another bird, and so that bird started singing, but the song that bird was singing didn't sound anything like the original, because he never learned the original song. So his song was all jacked up. It's like a bad R. Kelly remix, you know? And so, like, trapped in the closet over, over and over again, and nonsense. Anyway, so he forgot the song. So they made that bird, and it was the next generation, and guess what happens in the next generation? They forgot the song. They forgot the song because they never passed it down from generation to generation. So this happened for a while, for the second time, for the third time, and all of a sudden, a new zebrafinch emerged. And that zebrafinch started singing a song. And the song of that zebrafinch sounded exactly like the song of the ancestors that they actually removed them from. And the scientists' minds were blown. Because DNA says that you pass down genes and phenotype, but you don't pass down culture. How do you pass down a song? That means that is it possible that there's a cultural phenomenon that's embedded in DNA? Does it mean then that maybe our notion of what DNA is actually a simplistic rendering of the complexities of the culture of people in general? The fact that when I go down any street in any hood and somebody starts playing a beat and I hear, I don't know what it is, but I can't help but head nod and move like the rhythm just gets me. Do you mean then that if the zebrafinch can return back to that song, maybe perhaps rhythm and bass lines and voice inflections and analogies and metaphors, maybe those things are deeply rooted in the cultural DNA of people of color? Why couldn't that be the case? Maybe Watson and Crick's notion of what DNA is was not complex enough to capture who we are as folks with African traditions. What if DNA as we knew it is a flawed construct? What if it can't understand the ways that we know how rhythms and voices and songs are part of who we are? See, that's what I want y'all to be able to get to. And I'm going to close out here. When you're doing your research, when you're conducting your research, when you're going
journey now to become an academic and a scholar and an intellectual, you have to realize that who you are becoming, what you are presenting, yourself is a political act. That every word you say, every way you dress, every way you present yourself is speaking for a large tradition and a large population of who you are. And so my last question to you is, as you continue to conduct your research, will you do it as they want you to do it, or will you do it being better and soon with being finished? Thank you.
I mean, the first thing I want to say is that, there's a crop of folks on the horizon. Just like the zebra finch emerged back and started singing their own song, there are a lot of folks right now in the world of academia who are like, listen, we're going to sing our own song. And, there's a cadre of folks that I'm proud to be a part of. If you get on Hip Hop Ed, every week, thousands of people, professors, students, who are reclaiming this voice. So that's the one thing. And then the second thing, and it's outside the scope of my work here, but I work on this idea of teaching and learning called reality pedagogy. So in the introduction, that's what I do. I go literally around the country to schools, universities, high schools, whatever, teaching teachers the tools to be able to understand this. And the tools essentially is this. Nobody's asking you if you're white or older to be just like the kids, because you can't be. But there is an approach to teaching and learning called reality pedagogy, where you could teach them the tools to be able to understand that culture and have the students inform you about their culture as you inform them about the content, where there's some reciprocity. And I think that approach helps us to be able to fix what we got right now, while concurrently we are building the next army to be able to change the game in the future.